This program is brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Hello, Malma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. First to the Philippines, 3 barangays in Manila City will undergo a 48-hour hard lockdown to curb the spread of the coronavirus disease in the area. That is according to Manila Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Dumagoso. He also said that curfew hours in the city of Manila during community quarantine will now be from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. following the passing of a city ordinance. Let's listen in.
Yung gabi. Update. No? Marami po tayong update at saka meron din tayong mga barangay na ila-lockdown, no? Through the coordination also with IATF. So ano ang naging dahilan? Una po, yan po ay napagkasunduan ng Metro Manila Mayors. Okay, desisyon po namin lahat yan. No? So it's the entire Metro Manila. No? I don't know kung may batas na rin sa kanila ngayon, pero generally, out of 17 cities, municipality in Metro Manila, halos lahat po na-adjust na ng 10 o'clock. No? Okay. Eh ano po ang dahilan? Di ho ba nag-GCQ na tayo? O ngayon, sa GCQ, marami na pong mga empleyadong pumapasok. Tama naman. Eh exempted naman sila sa curfew, no? Kasi ano naman ho yun, may trabaho at allowed na ho ng IATF yung trabaho. Ngayon, dulot ng bang maliit na kaparaanan ng national government at local government na unti-unti na mabuhay ang negosyo, binuksan ang negosyo, lalo na sa food industry, no? Ang mga restaurant, kainan. O kaya lang, noong June 1 to June 15, no, ano naman ho, puro delivery lang. Pero nung 16, no, yesterday, pinayagan na po ang dine-in. No, tama ho ba? 30% ng espasyo mo, ng dining area mo, pinapayagan ng tumanggap ng customer. As long as those restaurants will follow rules and guidelines issued by the omnibus guidelines ng IATF. O hindi ho ba, bukas na yung restaurant para magkaroon na ng trabaho ang tao at magkanegosyo na at unti-unti na tayo mag-normalize. Pero may kaakibat yan na responsibilidad sa bawat isa, sa negosyante, sa establishmento, at ang kanilang customer, katulad na nagaganap sa mga mall.
In his update, Mayor Dumagoso also said the hard lockdown will be imposed on Barangay 60, Zone 5, Barangay 163, Zone 14, and Barangay 844, Zone 92, starting 12 a.m. of June 19 until 11:59 p.m. of June 20. He also reminded residents of the 3 barangays to prepare for the implementation of the order. Mayor Dumagoso said during the 48-hour hard lockdown, the city government will come to conduct massive testing on those areas. Exempted during the hard lockdown are healthcare workers, police and military personnel, government employees, service workers, utility workers, essential workers, barangay officials, and media practitioners, duly accredited by the IATF. The latest data showed around 1,883 residents have already been identified as confirmed COVID-19 cases after the Manila Health Department recorded 29 new active cases. We'll take a short break. Eagle News will be right back.
Star Tollway is a 41.9-kilometer highway that stretches out from Santo Tomas, Batangas all the way to Batangas City. An important component of the company's portfolio, the NAIA Expressway project is a 5.4-kilometer elevated expressway that connects the Skyway system to NAIA Airport terminals and the entertainment city. SMC Infrastructure's ventures also include other projects aside from the toll road business.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Mga kababayan, naharap na naman po tayo sa mabigat na pagsubok na ito. Ito yung COVID-19.
I hope everyone's okay. I hope everyone's safe.
Nandito po kami para hikayatin pa po kayo na maging matibay.
Mas maging matatag po tayo and just stay positive po sa lahat po ng nangyayari ngayon.
Mga mahal kong kababayan, lampasan po natin, pagtagumpayan po natin ang pagsubok na ito.
Stay strong sa panahon po na to.
Huwag tayong mawawalan ng pag-asa.
At inihikayat din po namin kayo na sana makinig po tayo sa ating gobyerno.
Sumunod muna tayo sa gobyerno dahil yun yung pinakamainam na paraan para hindi na lumagana pa yung virus.
Let's all stay at home.
Spend time with our loved ones, with our families.
At higit po sa lahat, make sure to pray. Pray for everyone. Pray for everything that is going on right now. Especially our frontliners po who are sacrificing their lives to take care of everything.
Higit sa lahat, patuloy tayong lumapit, magtiwala at manalangin sa ating Panginoong Diyos.
At lagi tayong manalangin dahil yung po ang may pinaka-mainam na solusyon sa lahat po ng mga problema natin.
God bless you and your family. Please stay strong and keep our faith.
Tuloy po ang laban.
Welcome back. The Philippine Navy on Wednesday started transporting home some of the 30 Filipino tourists and overseas workers it earlier repatriated from India and Sri Lanka, where they were stranded due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Lieutenant Commander Maria Cristina Rojas, Philippine Navy Public Affairs Office Chief, said in a statement that the repatriates have already completed the required quarantine period aboard the BRP Davao del Sur and have been found negative of COVID-19 in swab tests conducted upon their arrival last week. She said, quote, the transportation of some repatriates from LD 602 moored at Pier 15 in South Harbor, Manila, was in coordination with their local government units. One of the repatriates was brought to Villamor Air Base in Pasay City to take the sweeper flight of the Philippine Air Force's C-130 aircraft to Davao City, while another one was taken to the airport for a commercial flight, also to Davao. Others were fetched by their relatives. The 30 repatriates, 18 from India and 12 from Sri Lanka, were given a ride home after the BRP Davao del Sur and the offshore patrol vessel BRP Ramon Alcaraz fetch a donation of 200,000 pieces of face mask from a Filipino businessman based in India. The two ships comprise the Naval Task Force 82 or NTF 82 deployed to Oman last January as a contingency measure in case a massive evacuation of OFWs would be needed following tensions between the U.S. and Iran. The tension eventually eased off, but the COVID-19 contagion that began to sweep across the globe prompted the NTF 82 to go on another mission of transporting the donation of face masks and the stranded Filipinos. The NTF 82 arrived in Manila Bay on June 12 in time for the celebration of the 122nd anniversary of Philippine independence. Former Special Advisor to the National Task Force against COVID-19, Dr. Anthony Tony Lichion, was removed from his post because President Duterte disliked how he cast doubts on the Department of Health's reporting of the coronavirus disease data, according to Malacanang. In a virtual presser, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque explained that while it wasn't President Duterte who fired Lichion, the president was displeased with his remarks against the DOH. Let's listen in.
The President did not say he should resign kasi lahat naman kami, hindi kami talaga sigurado kung anong papel niya. Kaya ko po kinausap si Secretary Duque when he questioned DOH figures was I thought he was an advisor to Secretary Duque. Hindi pala. He told me he was advisor to Secretary Galvez. But when the President spoke, I hope Secretary Galvez does not mind. No? Ang sabi talaga ni Secretary Galvez, nanlambot siya with what the President declared as far as the statements of Dr. Liachon are concerned. Siguro po hindi po ako, hindi si Secretary Duque ang nag-udyok kay Secretary Galvez to let go of him. It was a declaration of the President himself. He's giving me too much credit. Pambansang laway lang po ako. Wala po talaga akong kapangyarihan na mag-compel sa kahit sino sa kanila na mag-resign. Bagamat, totoo po yan na dahil ako po ang tagapagsalita rin ng IATF, ako po ang namumuno ng Strategic Communication Group ng IATF. At nung siya po ay nagsalita, casting doubts doon sa figures ng DOH, no? Talagang lahat po ng miyembro ng Strategic Task Force ay talagang nagtatanong, bakit tayo tinitira ng ating sariling kakampi? So pinarating ko po ito kay Secretary Duque, no? At nung huling pagpupulong po kay Presidente, nanggaling naman po kay Presidente na bakit nagsasalita ng ganito itong si Liachon. So let me correct you, Dr. Liachon, hindi po ako, hindi si Secretary Duque. Mismong Presidente po noted that you should not be doing what you were doing. Kaya nga po kami nagalit kasi pinalalabas niya, nagsisinungaling ang lahat except siya. Hindi naman po pwede na siya lang nagsasabi ng katotohanan. Ang datos po linalabas natin. There is a need to improve yung reporting ng datos to make it accurate. Pero wala po nagsisinungaling. At kaya nga po, ang dami talaga nagalit doon na lang sa strategic communication kasi kami po, gabi-gabi nagpupulong po kami kung paano namin ipararating ang totoong nangyayari sa ating mga kababayan para naman kahit paano, pag alam nila ang datos, hindi po sila magpapanik. No? And here comes someone saying siya lang nagsasabi ng katotohanan. You do not have the monopoly of the truth and we have never lied. Saan po kami nagsinungaling? Dapat ilathala niya yan. No? We are perfecting the recording of cases. We have not perfected it yet, but we are striving po to improve and we will always give the truth and the true numbers as far as we know to the people.
Secretary Roque also defended the DOH's supposed late reporting of COVID-19 data, saying data from local government units, regional offices, and labs also came in late. He, however, assured that the DOH is taking steps to solve delays in the reporting of COVID-19 data by automating the COVID Kaya application. In a tweet on Wednesday, Liachon bared that he vacated his post but remained to have his full respect for Galvez. He previously expressed disappointment over the DOH's COVID-19 response efforts and reporting of the COVID-19 data. Galvez, in a separate statement, said Liachon was removed because his preemptive releases of information jeopardized the communication efforts of the NTF and the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases and caused misunderstanding between the two entities. Meanwhile, Japan is urging its citizens to install a coronavirus contact tracing app to save lives. Joining us live from Japan is Dennis Liu. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, Alma. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, Japan's government on Thursday urged citizens to install the country's first coronavirus tracing app when it launches this week, pledging that the system would not invade users' policy. The smartphone app, which like those in many countries relies on Bluetooth tracking and the permission of users, will launch on Friday. Nishimura Yasutoshi, the minister in charge of the government's coronavirus response, said it's an important tool to protect lives. The minister said the app will benefit users by quickly warning them of close contact with someone infected with the virus while protecting everyone's privacy. The software will record encrypted data from users of the smartphone app when they come within a certain distance of each other. When users who have tested positive for the coronavirus register their information, other users who had come within a meter of that person for at least 15 minutes will be notified. Nishimura explained the app will not record data that could identify individuals, such as phone numbers and location. Now, virus tracking apps have been launched in dozens of other countries in various forms, some sparking concern over privacy and government surveillance. But top government spokesman Yoshihide Suga said this week that the app developed under Health Ministry supervision will not record data that could identify individuals, such as phone numbers or locations. So you can use it with a sense of safety. Japan has had relatively small coronavirus outbreak with fewer than 18,000 recorded cases and a total of 935 deaths. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Dennis, for your updates there in Japan, and we look forward for more. Keep safe, stay healthy.
Thank you so much. Reporting live from Tokyo, Japan. This is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
Further easing of lockdown in Scotland will be announced or to be announced. Divina Morales joins us live from our EBC Scotland Bureau. Hello, Divina. Hello, Divina. Can you hear me now?
Oh, hi. Hello, Alma.
Hello.
Here is my update from Scotland. According to BBC News, Scotland's First Minister is to announce further easing of the country's lockdown rules. The move is likely to set a date when shops selling non-essential goods can reopen for customers. At phase 2, I'm sorry there. The move is likely to set a date. Oh, I don't hear anything. I'm sorry. According to BBC News, Scotland's First Minister is to announce further easing of the country's lockdown rules. The move is likely to set a date when shops selling non-essential goods can reopen to customers. At phase 2, the virus is controlled as evidenced by the continuous fall of death due to COVID-19. People could be allowed to meet another household indoors providing they are observing social distancing rules, which is the first time since the lockdown has been imposed across the UK on the 23rd of March. This phase will see workers being allowed to return to construction sites, warehouses, laboratories, and playgrounds are also open for the people, observing that they always 2 meters apart. The professional sports will be open or resume, although the football has been finished early and not yet due to open until August. Marriages and civil ceremonies should restart, but outdoors and with limited numbers. Ms. Sturgeon has previously stressed that not all changes will happen overnight, and it might not be until coming weeks that some are in place. The tourism industry, for example, has already been told to reopen on the 15th of July. Ministers are thought to be considering options for pubs and restaurants, as there is not yet expected to be an announcement on the reopening of indoor shopping malls. The Scottish government has generally been taking a more cautious approach of opening compared to their UK counterparts, like in England, where the shops has been reopened on the early weeks of the month. Figures released this week show that Scotland's economy went down by 18.9% in April, slightly lower than 20.4% recorded for the whole UK. Its unemployment rate, however, is the highest of any part in UK at 4.6%, partly because of its dependence on tourism. Ms. Sturgeon has been receiving pressures to speed up the easing process to limit the economic damage to the lockdown as much as possible. Speaking on Wednesday, the First Minister said she would continue to be cautious and continue in a phased way. She added, the more we hammer down the virus, the more normality we can have and get back to all aspects of our lives. Ms. Sturgeon acknowledged that the latest easing measures will not restore the economy to its full health right away, but insisted they would be significant, sustainable improvement on our current position. According to BBC News, like its UK counterpart, the Scottish government has been facing calls to reduce the current 2-meter distance rule to make it easier for the hospitality to reopen. There has been talks of tighter guidelines on wearing face coverings in public. People in Scotland are currently advised to cover their faces with a mask when they are in shops or public transport, but it is not compulsory and many people are not adhering to it. Schools in Scotland will stay closed to pupils until the new term in the 11th of August open. But there has been a lot of concern over the blended model that will be put in place when they do reopen. It will see pupils doing a mixture of classroom and home learning with individual councils deciding how it will be working in their areas. Some councils have already said that only a third of pupils can go to school at the same time. This means that a pupil can only go to school once a week. This has led to concerns of postcode lottery, with pupils in different parts of the country getting different levels of teaching. There has also been concern about the effect of part-time schooling on parents and on pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds. Back to you, Alma.
Okay, so you earlier said, did I hear it right? You said that the unemployment rate in Scotland is slightly higher than other UK counterparts due to
yes,
Scotland
Alma,
being...
that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is true because tourism is one of the main income revenues of Scotland, and in particular here in Edinburgh, wherein the Fringe Festival itself can generate £500 million in direct spend, but it was all scrapped due to COVID-19.
All right, thank you very much, Divina, for your update there in Scotland. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you very much, Alma. This is Divina Morales reporting for ABC Scotland. We live in interesting times.
Travel restrictions were placed on nearly 500,000 people near Beijing on Thursday as authorities rushed to contain a fresh outbreak of the coronavirus with a mass test and trace effort and lockdowns in parts of the Chinese capital. Another 21 cases of the virus were reported in the past 24 hours in Beijing, according to the National Health Commission, taking the total to 158 since a fresh cluster was detected last week after months of no confirmed local transmissions. One case was also recorded in the neighboring city of Tianjin and 2 more in Hebei province, which surrounds Beijing, prompting travel restrictions on Anxin County, home to nearly 500,000 people, banning most traffic going in and out of the area. Essential service vehicles are allowed into action about 150 kilometers from Beijing, while private and government cars can enter and leave only if they have permission, according to state media. Beijing is collecting around 400,000 samples a day for testing amid fears the new outbreak could trigger a second wave of infections in China, which had largely brought the contagion under control since it emerged in the central city of Wuhan late last year. The latest outbreak started in Beijing's sprawling Xinfadi wholesale market, which supplies more than 70% of the city's fresh produce. Some 30 residential compounds have been locked down. The United Nations said nearly 80 million people have been forced to flee their homes due to violence and persecution, meaning more than 1% of humanity is now living in displacement. Jim Hipolito joins us live from Geneva.
Good evening, Alma, there in Manila.
Good evening.
Yes, Alma, nearly 80 million people have been forced to flee their homes due to violence and persecution, meaning more than 1% of humanity is now living in displacement, the UN said Thursday. A press report from the United Nations Refugee Agency found that by the end of last year, a record 79.5 million people were living either as refugees, asylum seekers, or in internal displacement within their own countries.
My organization, UNHCR, issues a report on the situation of forced displacement of the previous year, of 2019. And unfortunately, one more time, this is a trend that has been going on since 2012, the figures are higher than the year before, which means that there's been more conflict, there's been more violence that has pushed people away from their homes to return. So the figures balloons continues to grow. This year it has reached the very dramatic levels of 79.5 million, almost 80 million. 1% of the world population cannot go back to their homes because there is war, persecution, human rights violation, and other forms of violence.
Thursday's report showed that at the end of 2019, nearly 46 million of those displaced remained inside their own country, while 26 million had fled across borders as refugees. Another 4.2 million people were asylum seekers, while 3.6 million Venezuelans displaced abroad were tallied separately. Last year, some 11 million people were newly displaced, many in a handful of conflict-racked countries and regions, the report showed. They include Syria, which after more than 9 years of civil war, counts 13.2 million people displaced either inside or outside the country, a full sixth of the global total. In fact, Grandi said a full 68% of the world's refugees come from just 5 countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. The report did not address the evolving displacement situation since the global coronavirus pandemic struck. Grandi said it was clear that crisis was complicating the situation for the displaced at a time when everyone is being told that being on the move is a liability for yourself and for others. But he noted that the poor and middle-income countries that host around 85% of the world's refugees had so far been relatively spared the worst health impacts of the pandemic.
But what we have really seen escalating dramatically is poverty. Lockdowns eliminate the type of economy on which these populations depend, the informal economy, daily wages, very fragile small incomes that depend on this type of jobs. This has disappeared almost immediately as countries hosting these people went in lockdowns. So this is where the biggest vulnerability is at the moment.
Grandi also reiterated that countries must continue granting asylum to those in need, despite border closures and lockdown measures. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Jim, for that update, for your report. And by the way, happy birthday, Jim.
Thank you, Alma.
How are you celebrating?
Yes,
Quiet
Reporting
celebration?
live from Geneva, Switzerland, this is Jim
Okay.
Hipolito, and we live in interesting times.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Early optimism that South Asia might have dodged the worst ravages of the coronavirus pandemic has disappeared as soaring infection rates turned the densely populated region into a global hotspot. After several months trailing the U.S. and Western Europe, cases of COVID-19 are surging across South Asia, home to almost a quarter of the world's population, where the virus is wreaking havoc on fragile medical systems and underfunded health agencies are pushed to breaking point. Overflowing hospitals from Kabul to Dhaka are turning away suspected virus patients. Mortuaries are being overwhelmed as cemeteries struggle to cope, and desperate families are searching for help for critically ill loved ones. Archie Clements, the Vice Chancellor of the Health Sciences Faculty at Curtin University in Western Australia, said the situation would likely worsen.
For weeks.
At the moment in South Asia, it appears that the epidemic is starting to take off. So we're starting to see large increases in numbers of cases, and it is becoming a bit of a global hotspot, I think, for the coronavirus pandemic. It is quite worrying, just because we're not seeing signs yet of the curve really being flattened, and we're seeing, for example, today in India, a large increase in the number of people unfortunately dying, and you would expect that because the curve for the number of people dying is delayed by a couple of weeks from the curve of numbers of people getting infected. And a couple of weeks ago, the numbers of people getting infected in India was increasing very quickly. So definitely would be expecting to see increasing numbers of deaths in South Asian countries, unfortunately. It's difficult to tell how high that will go or how long that will persist. But I do think that both the large countries in South Asia are in for some difficult weeks ahead. I think the ability of the health system to cope with an influx of people with illness it will be challenged. I think that the ability to diagnose infection and report it is challenged in those countries, and so there might be widespread community transmission without that necessarily being notified. And then, as a result, without public health measures being put in place. And that would be the case if India and Pakistan and Bangladesh don't get on top of the epidemic locally. They run the risk of the disease becoming endemic locally, that potentially being a source of infection for other parts of the world into the future. And really, I think the only way to escape that, if countries aren't able to get on top of it, is through the development and rollout of a vaccine.
If you just look at seemingly on a daily basis for a number of weeks, you've had new highs for new confirmed cases and deaths each day. That suggests that the curve is not at all flattening. It's nowhere near that. And the fact that you just have these overburdened medical facilities that cannot keep up with the rising number of cases, that suggests to me that I think South Asia is indeed arguably the big global hotspot now for the pandemic, and effectively. So basically, yes, I'm very skeptical about the official figures, just because I think that there hasn't been enough testing, and there are a number of people that haven't wanted to get tested or don't think they need to, and just because there's really no the regime, the death registration regime is just fairly wanting in both India and Pakistan, among other countries. So the hospitals just can't handle it. The health systems just can't handle this rise in cases, and that suggests that the fatality rates will go up significantly. And given that these countries struggle, under ordinary circumstances to fend off health epidemics and things like that, I really worry about the health implications. Well, I think that the threat of social unrest is very real. I think that the combination of unemployment and rising food costs and overall economic insecurity could well bring people into the streets, particularly in cities. And certainly that would place a lot of pressure on governments that are already increasingly vulnerable because of their...
It's the fourth worst hit country in the world with more than 354,000 confirmed cases Though limited, testing means the true number is likely much higher. The number of fatalities leaped by more than 2,000 to top 11,900 on Wednesday after Mumbai and New Delhi updated their figures. In neighboring Pakistan, which has reported more than 160,000 cases and over 3,000 deaths, Prime Minister Imran Khan resisted a nationwide lockdown, saying the country could ill afford it. Last week, burial figures released by 9 state-run graveyards in the Bangladeshi capital Dhaka, as well as dozens of small graveyards in a neighboring city, showed at least 1,600 additional deaths in April and May, according to a top Bengali news site. Yet, Health Ministry data show only 450 people died from COVID-19 in the two cities during the period. Similar anecdotes are emerging in conflict-battered Afghanistan, which has only acknowledged more than 26,000 cases and 500 deaths, seemingly impossibly low numbers for a country that failed to enforce lockdowns amid ongoing fighting and where impoverished day laborers are unable to stay home. Eagle News will be right back.
Us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back. India and China agreed Wednesday to ease tensions at their disputed Himalayan border, even as they traded blame for a brawl that left at least 20 Indian soldiers dead. The two nations' foreign ministers spoke by telephone to calm nerves after a high-altitude melee involving fists, rocks, and clubs. The call between China's Wang Yi and India's Subramanyam Jaishankar came as sources told AFP that Indian paramilitaries were being deployed to the area of the skirmish high in the Himalayas opposite Tibet. China state broadcaster CCTV, meanwhile, showed footage of People's Liberation Army tanks and soldiers holding live fire drills in Tibet. China has refused to confirm if it suffered any casualties in the first deadly clashes at the border in decades, although Indian media said at least 40 Chinese troops were killed or seriously hurt. India's foreign ministry said the two sides would implement a previously agreed disengagement, and neither side would take any action to escalate matters. However, ministry spokesman Anurag Srivastava said late Wednesday that making exaggerated and untenable claims is contrary to a responsible de-escalation in comments carried by the Press Trust of India. The incident, which took place Monday at around 4,500 meters up in the Galwan Valley area, dominated Indian news channels and inflamed social media in both countries. In India, small groups of protesters called for the boycott of Chinese goods, with some burning posters of Chinese President Xi Jinping. Prime Minister Narendra Modi told the nation the deaths of the soldiers will not be in vain. Sources said that military transport aircraft had made a number of rare nighttime landings in Leh, capital of India's Ladakh region, opposite China's Tibet, throughout Tuesday night. President Donald Trump pleaded with China's leader Xi Jinping for help to win re-election in 2020. The U.S. President's former National Security Advisor John Bolton writes in an explosive new behind-the-scenes book, according to excerpts published on Wednesday. Bolton alleges in a blistering critique that President Trump's focus on winning a second term was the driving principle of his foreign policy and that top aides routinely disparage the Republican leader for his ignorance of basic geopolitical facts. In excerpts published by the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, Bolton also claims President Trump repeatedly showed a readiness to overlook Chinese human rights abuses, most strikingly telling President Xi the mass internment of Uyghur Muslims was exactly the right thing to do. He said, "I am hard-pressed to identify any significant Trump decision during my White House tenure that wasn't driven by re-election calculations." Bolton writes of the real estate magnate turned president who was impeached in December for seeking dirt from Ukraine on his 2020 Democratic election rival Joe Biden. In a key meeting with President Xi last June, President Trump stunningly turned the conversation to the U.S. presidential election, alluding to China's economic capability to affect the ongoing campaigns, pleading with President Xi to ensure he'd win. Bolton claims in his upcoming tell-all. Bolton also wrote that Trump stressed the importance of U.S. farmers and how, quote, increased Chinese purchases of soybeans and wheat could impact the U.S. electoral outcome. When asked about the claims in the book on Thursday, China said it has always pursued the principle of non-interference in internal affairs. In other news, the World Health Organization welcomed the initial clinical trial results from the United Kingdom that show dexamethasone, a corticosteroid, can be life-saving for patients who are critically ill with COVID-19. The drug does not block the virus. It works by reducing inflammation in and around the lungs, according to Dr. Michael Ryan from the WHO. Dexamethasone is not a treatment for the virus itself, he said. Rather, the drug should be seen as one part of a combination approach to treat COVID-19. Let's listen in.
And yesterday, there was the welcome news of positive initial results from the recovery trial in the United Kingdom. Dexamethasone, a common steroid, has been shown to have a beneficial effect on those patients severely ill with COVID-19. According to early findings shared with WHO, for patients on oxygen alone, the treatment was shown to reduce mortality by about 1/5. And for patients requiring a ventilator, mortality was reduced by about 1/3.
It's exceptionally important that this drug is used under medical supervision. This is not for mild cases. This is not for prophylaxis. This is a very, very powerful anti-inflammatory drug. It can rescue patients who are in very serious condition where their lungs and their cardiovascular system around their lungs may be very inflamed. So this allows possibly that patients are able to continue getting oxygen into their blood from their lungs for a very critical period by rapidly reducing inflammation at a critical period in their illness. It is not a treatment for the virus itself. It is not a prevention for the virus. In fact, steroids, particularly powerful steroids, can be associated with viral replication. In other words, they can actually facilitate the division and replication of viruses in human bodies. So it's exceptionally important in this case that this drug is reserved for use in severely ill and critical patients who can benefit from this drug clearly.
The benefit was seen in patients who are on oxygen therapy, so who had already lung injury, or those patients that were on ventilation. So there was no benefit seen in the patients that had mild disease. So this study was not for prophylaxis. So I think that is the take-home message as you've described, Mike.
It is one, but of the many breakthroughs we're going to need in order to effectively deal with COVID-19. And as such, we should celebrate that today. But it's still just preliminary data. It's from one study. It's very significant, but we also have to see the real data, the full data, and we thank our colleagues in the UK for briefing us, but we still obviously, and they will be working very hard over the coming days to release detailed data to get this published in peer-reviewed journals, so everybody can see what the results are.
Researchers led by a team from the University of Oxford administered the widely available drug to more than 2,000 severely ill COVID-19 patients And among those who could only breathe with the help of a ventilator, dexamethasone reduced deaths by 1/3 and by 1/5 in other patients receiving oxygen only, according to preliminary results. Normally used to treat a range of allergic reactions, as well as rheumatoid arthritis and asthma, dexamethasone is an anti-inflammatory. The team said daily doses of the steroid could prevent 1 in 8 ventilated patient deaths and save 1 out of every 25 patients requiring oxygen alone. The trial, carried out by the Recovery Research Group that is searching for effective COVID-19 treatments, included a control group of 4,000 patients who did not receive the drug. However, the trial showed dexamethasone to be ineffective in treating patients with milder forms of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization also announced Wednesday it is dropping hydroxychloroquine, the malaria drug backed by President Donald Trump, from its global study looking at potential treatments for the coronavirus. Let's listen in.
Much less. And so, I could keep on continuing. That's one of the principles of. And we found that there was no mortality benefit in the patients receiving hydroxychloroquine compared to the control arm. So the UK's recovery trial and the solidarity trial, if you really put them together, the large number of patients where there's no benefit. And so it was decided that there was no point in continuing. It's what we call futility. When you are convinced that there is no benefit, then you do not keep on continuing. That's one of the principles of clinical trials. All viruses mutate all the time. Luckily, this virus seems to be mutating less than the influenza virus, much, much less. And it yet hasn't shown any mutations in the key areas which are either linked to severity of disease or linked to the immune response. So far, most of the vaccines are targeting the spike protein, so that's the key part of the virus that we are watching. We don't know if it will mutate, and our vaccine development program will then have to adapt itself because of the rapid speed at which things are being done. Is it possible to compromise on safety? And I think the answer is a clear no. So we're definitely engaging in discussions now with the developers of vaccines and others who are going to be sponsoring the trials to make sure that we have standard endpoints and data collection mechanisms where you evaluate both the efficacy, so how effective a vaccine is, and safety.
And finally, in our news, a time-lapse video shows the northern lights shine through moving clouds in Thompson, Manitoba on Tuesday night. Take a look. Manitoba region is one of the places where northern lights appear frequently. And the peak for watching the aurora borealis around Thompson is between January and March. But especially in northern parts of Manitoba, the northern lights are visible for up to 300 nights of the year. And before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.